On the morning of September 23, 1944, a Marine squad walked through a field of tall grass on Peleliu Island. The air was thick and hot. The sun beat down on their helmets. Somewhere ahead, birds made noise. The men moved slowly, rifles ready, eyes watching the tree line. They had been told the Japanese were everywhere on this island, hidden in caves, dug into coral ridges, waiting in holes too small to see. The Marines had been fighting here for 8 days. They had learned to trust nothing. Private James Haller was near the front. He was 19. He had joined the Marines 10 months ago. This was his first time in real combat, and he had seen things he did not think were possible. Men blown apart by artillery, bodies tangled in barbed wire, soldiers who went into caves and never came out. But this morning, the field looked empty. Just grass and dirt and the broken remains of a Japanese machine gun nest that had been hit by naval fire the day before. Haller stopped walking. He looked down. There were bodies in the grass. 3 of them. Japanese soldiers. They were lying on their backs, arms at their sides, eyes closed. Their uniforms were stained with blood. One of them had no helmet. Another had his rifle a few feet away. Haller relaxed a little. Dead men could not hurt you. He stepped past the first body and kept moving. Behind him, another Marine did the same. Then another. That was when the grass moved. The body Haller had just walked past sat up. It had a grenade in its hand. The explosion came fast. Haller hit the ground. His ears rang. Someone screamed. He turned and saw the Marine behind him was down, clutching his leg. Blood was spreading across the dirt. The Japanese soldier who had thrown the grenade was still sitting up. He was reaching for his rifle. Haller fired 3 times. The man fell back into the grass. But now the other 2 bodies were moving too. One rolled to the side and grabbed a weapon. The other tried to stand. The Marines opened fire, all of them at once. The sound was loud and sharp. The bodies jerked and twisted and finally went still. When it was over, Haller got to his feet. His hands were shaking. He looked at the 3 men lying in the grass. They were dead now. Really dead. But 5 seconds ago, they had been waiting, playing dead, letting the Marines walk past them so they could attack from behind. Haller's sergeant walked over. His face was hard. He did not say anything. He just looked at the bodies, then at Haller, then back at the bodies. Then he raised his rifle and shot each one again, once in the head. He turned to the squad. From now on, you shoot every body you see, every single one. You do not walk past them. You do not check them. You shoot them first. That is how we stay alive. No one argued. This was not the first time it had happened. It would not be the last. Across the Pacific, from Guadalcanal to Saipan to Iwo Jima, American Marines were learning the same lesson. The Japanese soldiers used positions they called octopus pots, small camouflaged holes dug about 3 to 4 feet deep. They hid inside them, waiting for Americans to pass. Some would wait for tanks to roll over them and blow themselves up. Others pretended to surrender, then killed Marines with hidden grenades when they tried to help. It changed everything. Before Peleliu, before Guadalcanal, the Marines had been told they were fighting an enemy who followed the same rules they did. Soldiers who fought hard, yes, but soldiers who acted like soldiers. That was not true. After the Battle of the Tenaru River on Guadalcanal, wounded Japanese soldiers shot Marines who came to help them. The Marines responded by firing more rounds into every body on the battlefield. Marine General Alexander Vandegrift was shocked. He wrote to the Marine Corps Commandant, "These people refuse to surrender. The wounded wait until men come up to examine them and blow themselves and the other fellow to pieces with a hand grenade." It was not just one island. It was not just one battle. It was everywhere the Marines went. On Saipan, Japanese soldiers dressed in American uniforms and helmets, trying to blend in. On Iwo Jima, they hid in tunnels, waiting for Marines to walk past, then attack from behind. English-speaking Japanese troops yelled corpsmen, pretending to be wounded Marines, to lure Navy medics into the open so they could kill them. The Marines began to understand. This was not a war where you could tell who was alive and who was dead. Every body was a threat. Every cave could hide a soldier. Every quiet moment could turn into an ambush. So they stopped taking chances. They shot the bodies, all of them. They threw grenades into caves before going inside. They burned positions with flamethrowers even after the shooting stopped. They did not wait to see if someone was really dead. They made sure. It was brutal. It was ugly. But it kept them alive. Back on Peleliu, Haller and his squad moved through the rest of the field. They shot every body they saw. They did not stop to check. They did not take chances. By the time they reached the tree line, they had fired more than 50 rounds into dead men. Some of the bodies didn't move. Some did. Holler didn't know which ones had been faking and which ones had been dead all along. He didn't care. He was still breathing. His squad was still walking. That was what mattered. But something had changed inside him. Something he could not put into words. He had crossed a line that morning. They all had. And there was no going back. The problem spread faster than anyone expected. Within weeks of the first battles on Guadalcanal, every Marine unit in the Pacific had stories. A patrol that lost 3 men to a soldier who had been lying in the dirt for 6 hours. A medic who died trying to help a wounded Japanese soldier who pulled the pin on a grenade. A tank crew that stopped to check bodies and got shot from behind. These stories moved from camp to camp. They were told in tents at night. They were written in letters home. They became part of the training. By the time new Marines arrived in the Pacific, they already knew. Do not trust the bodies. Do not trust the wounded. Do not trust anything. Lieutenant Daniel Marsh landed on Tarawa in November 1943. He was 23 years old. He had been an officer for 11 months. He thought he understood war. He had read the manuals, he had trained his men, he knew the rules. On his second day on the island, those rules stopped making sense. His platoon was moving through a bombed-out village. The buildings were wrecked, the streets were empty. There were bodies everywhere. Most of them were Japanese, some were Marines. Marsh told his men to keep moving, do not stop, do not look too close, just get to the other side. They were halfway through when one of his corporals, a man named Eddie Reyes, stopped walking. He was looking at something on the ground. A Japanese soldier, young, maybe 18. He was lying on his side, one hand pressed to his stomach. His uniform was soaked with blood. The man's eyes were open. He was breathing, barely. Reyes looked at Marsh. "Sir, he's alive." Marsh walked over. He looked at the soldier. The man was dying. Anyone could see that. He had maybe an hour, maybe less. Reyes said, "We should help him." Marsh shook his head. "We keep moving." "But sir!" "We keep moving." Reyes did not argue, but Marsh could see the look on his face. Confusion, maybe disappointment. Reyes had joined the Marines because he wanted to do the right thing. He wanted to fight with honor. He wanted to be one of the good guys. Marsh had wanted that too, once. They walked past the wounded soldier and kept going. 10 minutes later, they heard gunfire behind them. Another squad had come through the same area. One of them had tried to check the body. The Japanese soldier had been holding a grenade under his stomach. He waited until someone got close, then pulled the pin. 2 Marines died. The Japanese soldier died too. When Marsh heard the news, he felt nothing. No surprise, no anger, just tired. That night, back at camp, Reyes asked him a question. "Sir, when did we stop being the good guys?" Marsh did not know how to answer that. He still does not. The truth was, the Marines were trying to follow the rules. The Geneva Convention said you had to treat wounded enemy soldiers. You had to help them. You had to take prisoners when they surrendered. But what do you do when the enemy uses those rules to kill you? Marine General Holland Smith wrote about it after the war. He said the Japanese tactics forced Americans into behavior they never wanted to adopt. The Marines did not want to shoot wounded men. They did not want to kill soldiers who looked like they were surrendering. But they learned quickly that hesitation got you killed. On Saipan, a Japanese soldier walked toward Marine lines with his hands up. When Marines approached, he dropped to the ground and other hidden soldiers opened fire. After that, fewer Marines accepted surrenders. At Peleliu, wounded Japanese soldiers lay still for hours waiting for corpsmen to come close. The corpsmen stopped going. They had to. Too many of them had died trying to help. It became policy. Unofficial but real. Shoot first, check later. If a body moves, if it breathes, if it looks wrong, you shoot it. You do not think, you do not hesitate, you just pull the trigger. Some Marines hated it. They wrote letters home talking about how the war had changed them, how they did things they never thought they would do, how they couldn't sleep at night because they kept seeing the faces of the men they shot. Other Marines stopped caring. They became hard, cold. They did what needed to be done and did not think about it. They told themselves it was war. That was all. Just war. but most Marines fell somewhere in between. They did not like what they were doing, but they understood why they had to do it. They wanted to go home. They wanted their friends to go home, and the only way that happened is if they stayed alive. So they shot the bodies, they threw the grenades, they burned the caves. They did what they had to do, and they tried not to think too much about what it meant. By early 1945, the practice was everywhere. Marines routinely fired into enemy bodies to ensure they were dead. Officers stopped pretending it wasn't happening. They knew. Everyone knew. Some people back in the United States heard about it. They were whispers, rumors, stories from soldiers on leave. A few newspaper reporters asked questions, but no one wanted to talk about it. Not really. It made people uncomfortable. It did not fit the story Americans wanted to believe about their boys overseas. So the story stayed hidden, locked away in the memories of the men who lived it. Men like Lieutenant Marsh, men like Private Haller, men like Corporal Reyes. They carried it with them for the rest of their lives. The Japanese had a name for them: takotsubo, octopus pots. They were holes in the ground, just wide enough for one man, sometimes two. They were dug 3 to 4 feet deep, with narrow openings covered by wood, grass, or metal sheets. From above, they looked like nothing, just dirt, just ground. But underneath, a soldier waited. The Marines did not know about them at first, not really. They had heard rumors, warnings from intelligence officers who said the Japanese were using hidden positions. But hearing about something and seeing it are different things. On Iwo Jima, in February 1945, Sergeant Roy Bennett learned the difference. His squad was moving across an open field. The battle had been going for 3 days. The beach was behind them. The airfield was ahead. Between them and the airfield was about 400 yards of volcanic sand and scrub brush. They had already cleared the area once. Artillery had hit it, bombers had hit it, a tank had rolled through that morning and seen nothing. So Bennett thought it was safe. His squad spread out and started walking. Bennett was in the middle. To his left was a private named Kowalski. To his right was a lance corporal named Hayes. They walked 20 yards, 30, 50. Then the ground opened up. Kowalski was the first to go down. He dropped fast, clutching his chest. Bennett turned and saw a Japanese soldier standing up out of the dirt. He had a rifle. He was maybe 10 feet away. Bennett fired. The man fell back into the hole. But now more holes were opening. All around them, soldiers came up out of the ground like they had been planted there. Some had rifles, some had grenades. One had a sword. The Marines hit the dirt and started shooting. The noise was loud and close. Bennett could hear bullets hitting the sand next to his head. He could smell gunpowder and sweat and something else. Something burned. Hayes got hit, then another Marine, then another. Bennett kept firing. He emptied his rifle into one hole, then another. He did not know if he was hitting anything. He just kept pulling the trigger. Finally, it stopped. The shooting, the noise, everything. Bennett lifted his head. Around him, the field was quiet again. Smoke drifted across the sand. There were bodies on the ground. Some were Japanese, some were Marines. Kowalski was dead. Hayes was dead. 2 others were wounded. Bennett stood up slowly. He walked over to one of the holes. He looked down. It was small, maybe 3 feet across, 4 feet deep. The walls were smooth. At the bottom, a Japanese soldier lay on his back, staring up at nothing. Next to him was a rifle, a canteen, and a small box of ammunition. Bennett counted the holes. 7. All of them within a 50-yard area. All of them invisible until the soldiers inside decided to attack. He did not understand. How long had they been down there? Hours? Days? How did they breathe? How did they stay still that long? He asked his lieutenant. The lieutenant did not know. He asked his captain. The captain did not know either. But they learned. The Japanese soldiers would dig in and wait, sometimes staying underground for days. They had water, they had food, they had ammunition, and they had orders. Wait until the Americans pass, then attack from behind. Some positions were connected by tunnels, allowing soldiers to move unseen beneath the surface. A Marine could walk over an area, think it was clear, and get shot in the back 5 minutes later by someone who had been there the whole time. It drove the Marines crazy. You could not see them, you could not predict them.
You could walk across the same field 3 times and be fine, then get killed on the 4th because someone finally decided to pop up. The worst part was the fear. Not the sharp, fast fear of combat, the slow, heavy fear that came from knowing the ground itself could kill you, that every step might be your last. The man who shot you might have been lying 5 feet away the whole time, watching you, waiting. On Peleliu, a Marine named Thomas Curran wrote a letter home. He said the island felt wrong, like it was alive, like it was watching them. He said he could not sleep because he kept thinking about what was under the ground. He said he dreamed about holes opening up beneath his feet. 3 days after he wrote that letter, he stepped on a mine. He lost both legs below the knee. The Marines tried everything to find the holes. They used dogs. They used metal detectors. They poked the ground with bayonets. They walked slowly, looking for anything that seemed off. A patch of dirt that looked too smooth, grass that did not grow right, shadows that seemed wrong. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes they found a hole before the soldier inside attacked. But most of the time they did not. So they adapted. They stopped moving in straight lines. They stopped walking through open fields. They started throwing grenades into any spot that looked even a little suspicious. They brought flamethrowers. They brought explosives. They brought tanks. And when they found a hole, they did not try to talk the soldier out. They did not ask him to surrender. They just killed him. Fast, without thinking. Because if you thought about it, if you hesitated, he would kill you first. Sergeant Bennett understood that now. After Iwo Jima, after losing Kowalski and Hayes and the others, he understood it completely. The Japanese were not fighting to win, not anymore. They were fighting to kill as many Americans as possible before they died. That was the strategy. That was the whole point. And once you understood that, once you really accepted it, the rules stopped mattering. You did not fight to win battles. You fought to survive them. You did not think about honor or fairness or what was right. You just did what kept you alive. Bennett made it off Iwo Jima. He went home in June 1945. He got married. He had kids.
He lived a normal life, but he never forgot the holes. Even 60 years later, even when he was old and safe and far away from the war, he still thought about them. He still wondered how many he had walked past without knowing. How many times he had been inches away from a man who could have killed him, but chose to wait. He still had dreams about the ground opening up beneath his feet. Private First Class Michael Chen stood guard duty on the night of March 14th, 1945, somewhere on Okinawa. It was raining, not hard, just a steady drip that soaked through everything. His uniform stuck to his skin. Water ran off his helmet and down his neck. The ground under his boots was soft and muddy. He had been standing there for 2 hours. He had another hour to go. In front of him was darkness. Behind him was the rest of his unit, sleeping in tents and foxholes. Around him was silence, except for the rain. Chen was 20 years old. He had been in the Pacific for 8 months. He had fought on Saipan. He had fought on Tinian. He had seen things that still woke him up at night. But tonight was quiet. Nothing moved. Nothing made noise. Just rain and darkness and mud. Then he heard something. A voice, soft, speaking English. "Help me." Chen froze. He tightened his grip on his rifle. He looked into the darkness but could not see anything. The voice came again. "Please, I'm hurt." It sounded American. Young. Scared. Chen took a step forward, then stopped. He had heard stories. Japanese soldiers who spoke English would call out in the dark, pretending to be wounded Americans, trying to lure Marines close enough to kill. But what if it was real? What if there was actually a Marine out there, wounded, dying, calling for help? "Help me," the voice said again. "Please." Chen stood there in the rain. His heart was beating fast. His hands were shaking. He wanted to help. Every part of him wanted to believe it was real, wanted to run out there and bring whoever it was back to safety. But he had been taught better. He raised his rifle and fired 3 shots into the darkness, toward the voice. The voice stopped. Chen waited. 5 minutes. 10. Nothing moved. No one cried out.
no one attacked. He never knew if he had killed someone, or if there had been no one there at all. He never went to check. When his watch ended, he went back to his tent. He did not tell anyone what happened. He did not write about it in his letters home. He just lay down in his bedroll and stared at the canvas above his head until morning came. That was the kind of war it had become. You could not trust your eyes. You could not trust your ears. You could not trust anything. Every sound was a trap. Every movement was a threat. Every body was dangerous until you made absolutely sure it was not. The Marines were good soldiers. They had been trained to follow rules, to show mercy when possible, to accept surrenders, to help the wounded. But in the Pacific, those instincts got you killed, so they learned to turn them off, to ignore the voice that said, help him, or check on him, or maybe he's really surrendering. They learned to act first and think later, to shoot and keep shooting until nothing moved anymore. Some of them handled it better than others. Corporal Eddie Reyes, the one who had wanted to help the wounded Japanese soldier on Tarawa, stopped talking much after that. He did his job. He followed orders. But something inside him had changed. His friends noticed. He used to joke around, used to tell stories, used to smile. After Tarawa, he did not do those things anymore. He made it through the war. He went home to Los Angeles in November 1945. He got a job at a factory. He tried to move on. But he could not stop thinking about the wounded soldier. The one he had wanted to help. The one Lieutenant Marsh told him to leave behind. Reyes wondered if helping him would have made a difference. If showing mercy once, just once, would have meant something. He never found out. 10 years after the war ended, he killed himself. His wife found a note. It did not explain much, just said he was tired, that he could not carry it anymore. His story was not unique. Thousands of Marines came home from the Pacific with things they could not talk about, things they had done, things they had seen, choices they made that did not make sense to anyone who had not been there. Back in the United States, people wanted heroes. They wanted stories about brave men who fought with honor and won clean victories. They didn't want to hear about shooting bodies or burning caves or refusing to help wounded soldiers. So the Marines stayed quiet. They didn't talk about the spider holes or the fake surrenders or the way they had learned to shoot first and never ask questions. They kept it locked away. They carried it alone. Some of them broke under the weight. Some of them drank. Some of them could not hold jobs or keep families or live normal lives. Some of them ended up like Reyes. Others found ways to survive. They built walls around the memories. They told themselves it was war. That was all. Just war. They convinced themselves they had done what needed to be done and tried not to think about it too much. But late at night, when they couldn't sleep, the memories came back. The bodies in the grass, the holes in the ground, the voices in the darkness. Lieutenant Daniel Marsh lived until 2003. He never talked about the war with his children.
When they asked, he changed the subject. When they pushed, he got angry. His daughter found his journals after he died. Page after page of cramped handwriting. Names, dates, places, events. And on one page near the end, a single question written over and over. When did we stop being the good guys? He had asked Corporal Reyes that question on Tarawa in 1943. 60 years later, he still did not have an answer. Maybe there was no answer. Maybe that was the point. The war in the Pacific was not clean. It was not simple. It was not the kind of war where you could tell who the good guys were just by looking at their uniforms.
It was a war where the enemy used your mercy as a weapon, where your instinct to help got your friends killed, where the rules you were taught stopped making sense, and you had to make new ones just to survive. And those new rules changed you, turned you into someone you did not recognize, someone who shot voices in the dark, someone who burned bodies just to be sure, someone who walked past wounded men and felt nothing. The Marines did not want to become that. They had no choice. The Japanese tactics forced them into it. Every fake surrender, every hidden soldier, every grenade held under a dying man's chest. It pushed the Americans further and further from the people they had been, further from the rules they believed in, further from the idea that they were fighting a war the right way. And by the end, when the bombs fell and the war finally stopped, the Marines who came home were different. Not broken, not all of them, but changed. Marked by things they could never forget and could never fully explain. By the summer of 1945, the pattern was clear. The closer the Americans got to Japan, the worse it became. On Okinawa, the fighting lasted 82 days. More than 12,000 Americans died there. The Japanese lost over 100,000. But the numbers did not tell the real story. The real story was what happened in between the battles, in the moments when the shooting stopped and the Marines had to decide what to do next. Sergeant William Foster was there. He was part of the 1st Marine Division. He had been fighting since Guadalcanal. 3 years of island hopping. 3 years of watching friends die. 3 years of learning how to stay alive. On Okinawa, his unit moved through a village that had been bombed 2 days earlier. The buildings were gone, just rubble and smoke and twisted metal. The smell was terrible, bodies everywhere. Civilians mixed with soldiers. No way to tell who was who until you got close. Foster's squad moved carefully. They checked every corner, every pile of debris, every shadow that looked wrong. They found a wounded Japanese soldier behind what used to be a stone wall. He was young, maybe 17. He had been shot in the leg. The wound was bad, bleeding heavy. He was not going anywhere. The soldier saw them and raised his hands. He said something in Japanese. Foster did not understand the words, but he understood the tone. Pleading, begging. One of Foster's men, a private named Donnelly, lowered his rifle. "Sarge, he's giving up." Foster looked at the wounded soldier. Then he looked at Donnelly. The kid was new. He had only been in the Pacific for 6 weeks. He still believed in rules. Foster had believed in rules once too. "Step back," Foster said. "But he's..." "Step back." Donnelly did not move. He looked confused, hurt even. Foster raised his rifle and shot the wounded soldier twice. The man slumped against the wall and stopped moving. Donnelly stared at him. "Sarge, what the hell?" Foster walked past him without answering. The rest of the squad followed. No one said anything. Later, when they stopped to rest, Donnelly asked again, "Why did you do that?" Foster was quiet for a long time. Then he said, 2 months ago, on Peleliu, a kid like you tried to help a wounded Japanese soldier. The man had a grenade taped to his stomach, hidden under his shirt. Both of them died. So did another Marine who was standing too close. But that guy didn't have... You don't know what he had. Neither do I. And I'm not going to find out. Not anymore. Donnelly did not understand. Not then. But he would. Give him a few more weeks, a few more bodies, a few more friends bleeding out in the dirt. He would understand. Everyone did. Eventually. The Japanese had done something no other enemy had managed to do. They had turned the basic human instinct to help into a liability. They had made mercy dangerous. They had made compassion deadly. And in doing so, they had changed the men who fought them. Not just their tactics, not just their methods, but something deeper, something in the way they saw the world. After the war, military historians studied what happened in the Pacific. They noted that American forces rarely took Japanese prisoners compared to the European theater. In Europe, thousands of German soldiers surrendered and were taken into custody. In the Pacific, it was different. Most Japanese soldiers fought until they died, and when they did try to surrender, American troops often shot them anyway. The historians wrote careful reports. They used phrases like tactical necessity and operational reality. They did not use words like murder or war crime. They understood what had happened. They understood why. But understanding it did not make it easier to accept. The truth was simple and ugly. The Japanese had played a game where the rules didn't matter, where fake surrenders and hidden traps were not dishonorable, but strategic, where dying while killing one more American was considered a victory.
Because playing by the old rules got you killed. Sergeant Foster survived the war. He went home to Michigan in December 1945. He got a job at an auto plant. He got married. He had 3 kids. He went to church on Sundays. But he never forgot the wounded soldier behind the wall on Okinawa. He never forgot the look on Donnelly's face. He never forgot the moment he pulled the trigger. In 1987, a reporter interviewed him for a local newspaper article about World War II veterans. The reporter asked if he had any regrets about his service. Foster thought about it for a long time. Then he said, "I did what I had to do. We all did. If we hadn't, we wouldn't have made it home. But that doesn't mean I'm proud of it." The reporter did not put that quote in the article. It did not fit the story people wanted to read, but it was the truth. The Pacific War forced good men to do terrible things. It forced them to ignore their training, their morals, their basic human decency just to survive. It took young men who believed in fairness and honor and turned them into something harder, something colder. And when it was over, when they came home and tried to go back to normal life, they carried those moments with them, the bodies they shot, the cries they ignored, the mercy they could not afford to give. Some of them made peace with it. They told themselves it was war, that the enemy had started it, that they had no choice. Others never made peace with it. They lived with the guilt and the memories and the knowledge that they had crossed lines they never thought they would cross. But all of them, every single one, understood the same truth. The Japanese tactics had worked. Not in winning the war, they lost that, but in forcing the Americans to become something they did not want to be. In proving that even good men, when pushed far enough, will do things they never imagined. In showing that war does not just kill bodies, it kills parts of you that you can never get back. The war ended on August 15th, 1945. Japan surrendered. The fighting stopped. The Marines started coming home. Private James Haller, the one who walked past the bodies on Peleliu, came back to Ohio in October. His family threw him a party. His mother cried. His father shook his hand. His younger brother wanted to hear stories about the fighting. Haller did not tell any stories. He got a job at a hardware store. He married a girl he had known in high school. He bought a house on a quiet street with trees in the front yard. He lived there for 53 years, but he never talked about the war. Not really. When people asked, he said it was tough, that he was glad it was over, that he was lucky to make it home. He did not tell them about the grass on Peleliu, about the bodies that sat up, about the sergeant who taught him to shoot every corpse he saw. He did not tell them that for the rest of his life, whenever he walked through tall grass, his heart started beating faster, that he could not help looking down at the ground, half expecting it to move. He did not tell them about the dreams, the ones where he was back on the island, walking through that field again, and this time he did not shoot fast enough. His wife knew something was wrong. She would wake up in the middle of the night and find him sitting at the kitchen table, staring at nothing. She would ask if he was okay. He would nod and say he was fine, just could not sleep. She stopped asking after a while. Haller was not unusual. Across the country, thousands of Pacific veterans came home carrying the same weight, the same memories, the same silence. They did not have words for what they felt. There was no language for it. No one back home understood what it had been like. The fear, the choices, the things they had to do just to survive. And trying to explain it felt impossible. How do you tell someone who has never been there that you shot wounded men, that you threw grenades into caves without checking who was inside, that you walked past people begging for help because helping them might get you killed? How do you say those things out loud without sounding like a monster? So most of them did not say anything at all. They buried it, locked it away, tried to move forward. Some managed better than others. Sergeant Roy Bennett, the one who survived the spider holes on Iwo Jima, came home to Texas. He worked construction for 30 years. He raised 4 kids. He seemed fine on the outside, but his daughter remembered something. She was maybe 8 years old. They were on a family picnic. Her father was standing in an open field looking at the ground. She walked up next to him and asked what he was doing. He didn't answer right away. He just kept staring at the dirt. Finally, he said, "Just checking." "Checking for what?" she asked. He looked at her. Then he smiled, a strange, sad smile. "Nothing, sweetheart. Nothing." She did not understand it then. Years later, after he died, she read some of his letters from the war, letters he had written to his mother but never sent. In one of them, he described the holes on Iwo Jima, making sure nothing was hiding underneath. Lieutenant Daniel Marsh, the officer from Tarawa, tried to talk about it once. It was 1952. He was at a reunion with some of the men from his old unit. They were drinking, telling stories, laughing. Someone brought up Tarawa. Someone else mentioned the wounded Japanese soldier Marsh had told Corporal Reyes to leave behind. The laughter stopped. Marsh said, "I think about that guy sometimes. If we had helped him, maybe it would have been different. Maybe word would have gotten around that Americans treated prisoners well. Maybe more of them would have surrendered." One of the other officers, a man named Harris, shook his head. "That's not how it worked, Danny. You know that. Helping one guy would not have changed anything. They were not going to surrender. That was not their plan." "I know," Marsh said, "but I still think about it." Harris looked at him. "We all do." That was the truth. All of them thought about it. The moments when they made choices they could not take back. The times they did things they were not proud of. The people they left behind. But thinking about it did not change anything. The war was over. The choices had been made. The bodies were long buried. All they could do was keep living, keep moving forward, keep trying to be normal. And most of them did. They had families. They had jobs. They went to church. They paid taxes. They mowed their lawns. They became part of their communities. But inside, in the places no one else could see, they carried the Pacific with them. The islands, the heat, the fear, the choices. They carried the grass on Peleliu, the holes on Iwo Jima, the voices in the darkness on Okinawa. They carried the knowledge that they had done things good men were not supposed to do, and that those things had kept them alive. In 1998, a group of World War II veterans gathered for a documentary interview. The filmmakers wanted to hear their stories, their memories, their experiences. One of the veterans, a man in his 70s, talked about the Pacific. He talked about the fighting, the fear, the loss. Then he stopped. He was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, "People always ask me if I'm proud of what I did over there, and I never know how to answer, because the truth is I'm not proud, but I'm not ashamed either. I did what I had to do. We all did. And I'm still here because of it." He looked at the camera. His eyes were wet. "That's all I can say. I did what I had to do." The filmmakers did not use that footage. It was too raw, too honest, too uncomfortable. But it was the truth. The Japanese tactics in the Pacific War changed the men who fought against them. It forced them to become harder, colder, more brutal. It taught them that mercy could get you killed, that trust was dangerous, that the only way to survive was to shoot first and never look back. And when the war ended, those lessons did not just disappear. The men brought them home, carried them for the rest of their lives, passed them down in small ways to their children and grandchildren. Not through stories,
Most of them never told the stories, but through silence, through nightmares, through the way they looked at the ground when they walked through open fields, through the way they flinched at sudden noises, through the sadness in their eyes that never quite went away. That was the real cost of the war in the Pacific. Not just the men who died, but the men who survived and had to live with what they had done. The bodies in the grass, the holes in the ground, the voices they did not answer. Those things did not stay on the islands. They came home too, and they never really left.